this podcast is not sponsored in any means by EnRoads, but I do want to take a short visual break. So for anybody listening to the podcast, make sure you pop over to the short video that we're going to do here for showing EnRoads and how that works, because this is a really interesting piece of software which allows you to look at that. And so walk me through a little bit on EnRoads. What does it do and how do I play with this?
Yeah, well, you just go onto the website en-roads.climateinteractive.org and just keyword it en-roads. Its previous thing was called C-Roads, which was pivotal for the 2015 Paris Protocol negotiations that the IPC put on. But this one's much more policy heavy, where we can like adjust where our energy supply is coming from through these 8 sliders, and you can see where the past 20 years of history for the world's energy, where it was and where it's going for the next 80, and then temperature change, where we were 20 years ago and where we are now, and where we're projected to go, with these dashed lines of being like 1.5 degrees C above pre-industrial levels, which would be ideal, and 2 degrees where we still may be okay, but we'll have to sacrifice ocean, the ocean reefs and a few other, bad things will happen, but we'll still survive if it goes above 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. And then, you can just basically any one of these sliders, and you can like check out a detailed thing by clicking on those 3 dots and seeing what it does. And I can go through and talk about all those different things. But for a quick thing is like I talked about on a global scale, electrification, which is great for Maine. But if we did that across the world, it has a disappointing thing because coal goes up, as I had said before, or we can, like the Republican only ideas have been talking about like planting a bunch of trees, mainly because it doesn't touch where oil, where the energy sector is. You can do that, and of course, it doesn't change where the energy is coming from, but it shaves off 1/10 of 1 degree, but still far from where we want to go. Or we can like highly incentivize renewables, which is great. You push that back up, and green goes through the roof, which is awesome. But you can also see like coal takes a dip, but then it goes back up again because after the initial hit, coal's going to get cheap, and then people are going to want to buy it again because it's cheap. So that's, these are all things to look at. But the one that we've been talking about, there is no silver bullet. But there's a silver buckshot. We can put a $15 price on coal and go up every year. So that, let's see, $10 conservatively, the least it would go up is $10 a year. It kind of go up more, but it'd be 800, goes 80 years plus $10 plus the initial $15. And over the next 80 years, starting this year, well, I'm just typing these all in. You can see a gradually linear relationship of that price of carbon when that money all goes back to people. And it doesn't get us down to 2 degrees, but it does more than twice any other. It's 2.6, which is more than any other single policy.
Yeah, Peter, before you go too far with that, I just want to comment on something that we should expand on, something that you just pointed out, which is if you incentivize renewables, people will slow down on the consumption of fossil fuels, and specifically the one of real concern is coal, clearly. But the important point that you made, which we should just emphasize, is that when you do that, since demand will drop, what will happen? The price will go down. And once the price goes down, all of a sudden coal becomes economically viable again. And away you go. It starts to become a bigger and bigger contributor, not something that we want, which is why simply incentivizing one thing or another thing doesn't necessarily do the whole thing that you want to accomplish. You need to disincentivize the bad things, as you said earlier, right?
Right, exactly, right. And that's the way, and this is the magic of this, is that it does kind of both at the same time.
Right.
It makes coal that much. And then I can just showing you to wrap this up is like charcoal is carbon, which is going to continue to go up unless we do something about it. But you can see, like, by the end of the century now, it's methane. So then we can talk about like a complementary future legislation would be dealing with methane, which is land use and natural gas line leaks and that kind of stuff. And then with just those 2 policies, we're almost at that magic 2 number. And then you can talk about once you put those in place, then energy efficiency and electrification, all that stuff, once you've kind of like disincentivize the carbon emissions, all those other things become truly green because you're not worried about them releasing greenhouse gases in other spots. And like this graph shows, like the poorer you are, the more that equal dividend check helps you out. Like you can see, like most people on the bottom end of the economic spectrum, they're doing great. Everybody up until about 70 percentile. And like I said, the top 30 is the ones we need to hit. And this is just leave you this. This is the map of the world. Like one thing we haven't talked about is, the world is all coming to terms with this. Canada is a great example of this. They've had this policy for almost 15 years, but the EU just announced that starting January 1, 2023, they will be imposing basically the equivalent tariff on any products coming into their common market from a country that doesn't have carbon pricing. So we're, like if we're going to try to export our lobsters to the EU, and we don't want them to slap a tariff on it, which Canada's not going to have because they're already pricing their carbon, then this makes a lot of business sense, and we're going to have to adopt this fast in order to join the world community.